Hello students and namaste everyone. I am Dhaval sir and our today's topic is from your supplementary reader chapter number 3, that is the selfish giant. Alright, this story is written by Oscar Wilde and this story is about a giant who disliked anyone playing in his garden. Right, so upon finding the children in his garden one day, he scared them away and built high walls around it and put up a notice board saying that trespassers will be prosecuted. Trespassers, that is the meaning of trespassers, means any person who is entering any private property without the consent or without the permission and which is considered to be illegal, so that person is known as trespasser. Right, and prosecuted means a case can be filed in the court and the person can be punished by the court, right? So he put this notice right on the board saying that trespassers will be prosecuted, and further in the later part of the chapter the story tells us about the giant's transformation from being selfish to kind and how he earned himself a place in paradise. Right, that means after his death, how he earned his place in the paradise. Right, so this is a brief explanation of the chapter, but now we'll try to understand the story in detail. Right, so I'll start again, and this story is about a selfish giant, right, who owns a garden where every afternoon after the school the children would come and play. Right, it was a very large garden, a huge garden with soft green grass, and there were 12 peach trees. Right, peach is a fruit, so there were 12 peach trees that gave fruit in the autumn season and flowers that came out of the grass. Right, so such a wonderful garden it was, and the birds would come and sing in the garden, and the children would stop playing their games in order to listen to these birds singing in the garden. Suddenly one day the giant came back and scared all the children away. He had actually been to his friend, name was Cornish Orch, for 7 years. Right, he was not at his home. He had visited his friend's place where he had stayed for 7 years, and his friend's name was, the giant's friend's name was Cornish Orch. Right, so as he saw the children playing, he told them that no one except him can play in his garden, and therefore he built a huge wall around his garden. Right, and as I said that later on he put up a notice board saying that trespassers will be prosecuted or punished. Right, so now the poor children had no place to play, and they later on tried playing on the road, but it was too dusty and filled with hard rocks. Right, so therefore the children kept on remembering that how happy they were when they played in the garden. Right, then the story proceeds further, and there is a description about the spring season, right, all across the country, but the giant's garden, right, it was still winter over there. Right, so this is actually an imaginary story. Right, so when there was spring season in all the places in whole country, right, but still in the giant's garden it was winter. Right, and the only residents in his garden were frost and snow. Right, that had covered all the trees and the grass, and this frost and snow are said to have invited the north wind. So these north winds are very chilly, right? And they bring with them snow and hail and everything, right? So it is described that this snow and frost might have invited the north wind over to come over there, and they have wrapped it all around the garden, right? And they thought it was a delightful place, and also invited the hailstones, right? uh, which had come over there, and it was dressed in gray. So this is what the description about different seasons and is given in the story. The giant, looking at this, kept on wondering when the spring would come in his garden, right? While at the same time the frost, the snow, the north wind, and the hail stayed happily in his garden, right? So this hailstones, then frost, snow, north wind are not considered as a good sign, because in foreign countries, at some places in the northern part of the world, these things brings chilly winds and cold, and therefore the people cannot go out of their house, and everything comes to standstill, right? So after the spring season, even when the autumn season came, right, still in the garden of the giant there was no autumn season found. So it is believed that even the autumn season might have refused to come, as the autumn season might have thought that this giant was too selfish, right? So this is what the imagination of the writer is. And on one morning, as the giant was awake in his bed, right, he heard some mesmerizing music. Okay, so he thought that the king's musicians were passing by, but in reality, or actually, it was the linnet song that sounded so sweet. Linnet is a kind of a small bird, right? So it was the linnet's sound. And as the giant woke up to see, he saw the most wonderful sight, right? What did the giant saw when he woke up? He saw that the children had entered in the garden through a small hole in the wall, and with them in the garden, the trees were happy, the birds had come back, the flowers grew out of the garden ground, and the spring finally came, right? But in farthest corner, far away, in one part of the garden, in the corner, right, there was still winter. That means it was covered with snow and everything. So he tried to find out the reason, right? So as he tried to look, the giant saw a little boy who was so short that he could not reach till one of the branches of the tree, right? And therefore that boy was sad. So the giant tried to help the child, right? So the giant ran towards the child to help him, but instead of that, all the children in the garden, they got scared away, right? They thought the giant is coming to beat them up, right? So only the boy in the farthest corner stayed over there, because he could not see the giant approaching, because his eyes were filled with tears. The giant helped him to climb the tree, and this little boy hugged and kissed the giant in return, right? So upon seeing the transformed behavior of the giant, the rest of the kids returned back and started playing with each other in the garden. Okay, then finding this thing, the giant realized that his garden will look more beautiful and happy only when these children will be playing in his garden. So he broke down the walls and opened the garden for the kids, and every afternoon the children would come to play with him, and come to play with him after the school got over. And the giant kept on looking for a dead boy whom he had once helped, but unfortunately he never came and no one knew about him. Right, so the giant tried to find out who that small child was, but no one knew about that child. Years passed by, and the giant grew old and weak, and he now only watched the children play. And on one winter morning, as he looked out of the window, he saw a marvelous sight. Right, he was very surprised and happy to see in the same farthest corner of the garden, the tree was covered with blossoms. Right, there were flowers and everything. The tree was fully blossomed. Its branches were golden and it bore fruits. And underneath the tree, below the tree, he saw the little boy that he once had helped. Right, and happily the giant went downstairs into the garden to meet the child, but as soon as he went near him, the giant grew angry. Why? Because the child had imprints of 2 nails on his hands and 2 on his little feet. Right, there were imprints or a scar. Right, the giant asked the kid the name of the person who had wounded him. Right, then the child told the giant that those were the wounds of love. Right, no one had beaten him, or the scars were not because of any cruelty. Right, those were the sign of love. So instantly the giant was struck with awe. The giant got surprised and knelt before the child, and the child told him that once he had allowed him to play in his garden, and now it was time for the giant to come in his garden. His means the child, which was actually a paradise. Right, so in the afternoon, when the children, all the children came to play in the giant's garden, they found that the giant was lying lifeless. Lifeless means dead, on the ground with white blossoms spread all over him. So actually this kid was someone who took the giant to the paradise, that means in the heaven, because there was a transformation in the giant from being selfish to be kind. Right, and therefore the giant got a place in the heaven or a paradise. And that is how the story gets over. And we will also end our lecture over here. And I thank you everyone for watching my video.